finalize a deal by 21st of July, according to Canada's finance ministry. And it's important to also highlight that the Trumpian tariffs have taken a toll, especially on Canada's economy. We've already seen the kind of relations nosediving, especially under the previous Trudeau government, and things seem to have, reached much of a headway after Donald Trump interacted with the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney during the G7 summit. So it's now it's being seen as a fresh start. And they could not, both sides, especially Canada, could not have afforded this breakdown in trade talks. And as I said, this was a 3% digital tax which Canada was looking to impose on $20 million in a calendar year. But this was also a move by Canada to sort of reciprocate the Trumpian tariff, but seems that it's been withdrawn.
All right. Many thanks, Akansha, for bringing us that context. And with that, we're going to slip into a short break. More news and update on the other side. Stay tuned.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Welcome back. Now we are getting a breaking input from the international front. Now Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says trade talks with US have resumed after Canada rescinded its plan to tax US technology firms. Now this comes after US President Donald Trump suspended trade talks with the neighbouring nation over its plan to continue with its tax on US tech firms, which he called a direct and blatant attack on our country. All right, so this is the latest as far as the US and Canada trade talks are concerned. Remember, US, in fact, last time has said that there are not going to be any negotiation with Canada because of the tax that they have put on US technology firms. And now the latest that we are getting to know is that the talks between Canada and US is going to resume. And this has been confirmed by the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who says that the trade talks with US have resumed after Canada rescinded its plan to tax US technology firms. Now, this is happening after US President Donald Trump has in fact suspended the trade talks with the neighboring nation over its plan to continue with its tax on US tech firm, which he has called it a direct and blatant attack on the country. I'm now joined by CNN News 18's Akansha Swaroop on this broadcast. Akansha, the talks between US and Canada, which was in fact completely withdrawn by both the sides, is now going to continue again. What is really the conditions on which the talks is going to continue now?
So what we can tell you is that they are going to resume because on Friday, Donald Trump had called off the trade talks. He had said that it was a blatant attack. And remember, this is a digital services tax that you are looking at, which was imposed on all of these US tech firms. And they were supposed to be paying 3% of their business, which was above $20 million per year. And the Canadian Prime Minister and US President now will be resuming trade negotiations because
Hello and good evening. I am Gushin Galan and you're watching Vantage. Our lead story tonight is from China. Chinese manufacturers have begun what experts call a silent blockade on India. There are no formal export curbs, but in reality, supplies of fertilizers and rare earth magnets are being restricted. What are the implications for India? And what does this mean for the reset of India-China ties? We'll break it down. In Pakistan, Field Marshal Asim Munir is back in the spotlight once again for his anti-India rhetoric and bluster on Kashmir. In China, another round of purge is underway in the military. We'll look at what that means for the PLA's combat readiness. In West Asia, is Netanyahu ready to end the war in Gaza? We'll bring you the latest from the region. Also, what is Sam Altman planning next at OpenAI as the AI giant faces challenges from competitors? In Sri Lanka, India has scored a big win. We tell you what it means. We'll discuss all that and more coming up, but first, the headlines. US President Donald Trump says he is not offering Iran anything. Neither is he talking to them. Trump reiterates that the US strikes have totally obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities. This comes as Tehran says talks with Washington cannot resume unless the US rules out further strikes on Iran. Israel eyes striking peace agreements with neighbouring Lebanon and Syria. It is a potentially historic shift in the region. Control of the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights remains a contentious issue between Israel and Syria. But the Netanyahu government says it is interested in expanding the Abraham Accords, which Israel signed with the UAE, Bahrain and Morocco in 2020. Bangladesh opens the murder trial of a key student protester. His killing last July escalated demonstrations nationwide. The protest ultimately ousted the then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Abu Saeed was the first student demonstrator to be killed in the police crackdown. 30 people have been charged in connection with his death. In India, police say the alleged rape of a law school student in Kolkata was premeditated. Authorities say 3 of the 4 men arrested planned the crime in advance. The police say the prime accused is also a serial offender. He has at least 5 cases registered against him. This includes attempt to murder, sexual assault and extortion. And militants from the Kurdistan Workers' Party will disarm in early July. That's according to local media reports. This comes just a week after the PKK announced it was ending its decades-long armed conflict with Turkey. Kurds make up about 20% of Turkey's population of 85 million. Relations between India and China were supposed to be improving. Both sides agreed on a border deal last year. It is aimed at resetting the freight ties. Since then, we have seen some positive changes, like some bilateral visits, more strategic meetings, and de-escalation at the border. Despite this, one area remains troubled, and that is trade. China appears to have imposed a silent blockade on India. Now on paper, there are no curbs on selling to India. But in practice, it's very different. Beijing is choking the sales of fertilizers to India. There is no official ban in place. Instead, Beijing is using other indirect means. For instance, every shipment is supposed to be inspected before being exported. If you don't inspect, you cannot export. Hence the term silent blockade. Reports say this has been happening for 2 months. And Indian firms are rightly worried. We buy around 160,000 tons of fertilizers from June to December. Around 80% of this comes from China. And needless to say, this is a crucial import item. As a country of 1.4 billion people, food isn't just an industry for India. It is a matter of national priority. We use fertilizers to boost our farming output. If there is a shortage, this output could suffer. In the long run, maybe India can plug this shortage. But in the short run, there is very little India can do. And China knows this. An official blockade would be hard to defend. Instead, Beijing has opted for this silent method. Basically, using procedures and protocols to delay and deny shipments. And it is not just fertilizers. China imposed similar curbs on rare earth magnets too. Now, rare earth are a group of 17 elements. They are used in a host of things, from fighter jets to phones to cars. And China makes up 90% of rare earth processing. So any blockade would trigger a shortage. The question is, why is China doing this? Aren't we in the middle of a reset? In theory, yes. Last week, India's defense minister travelled to China. It was the first ministerial trip since 2020. In China, Rajnath Singh met his counterpart. He called for a permanent solution to the border crisis. In fact, he also spoke about avoiding new complexities. And China has always been keen on this reset. We saw that after Donald Trump unleashed his tariff war. President Xi wrote to Indian President Draupadi Murmu. He called for a dragon-elephant tango. Even in the past, Beijing has called for normalizing the ties. Then what explains the silent blockade? Well, there are two possible reasons. Number one, it's a negotiating tactic. We are in the middle of talks to reset this relationship, so China is flaunting its leverage. It is exposing India's dependence on Chinese imports. Why? To get favorable results, like a removal on the ban on Chinese technologies, or easier, clearance from Chinese investments. That's the first possible reason. Or number two, the Chinese feel confident. Initially, they wanted India's help against the United States. Xi wanted to jointly take on Donald Trump's tariffs. But that equation has changed recently. India's ties with Trump have soured, all thanks to President's mediation rants. Plus, China is making progress on signing a deal with Trump. At first, the tariffs seemed lethal, but now they look manageable. Perhaps that explains China's aggressive trade strategy. Whatever the motive, New Delhi must take note. China is our largest trading partner. Bilateral trade is higher than $130 billion. A lot of that includes strategically important items like fertilizers and rare earths. And just to be clear, this problem isn't limited to India. Most of the world depends on China for such products. The difference is A, we share a border, and B, we have 1.4 billion people. So how should India handle this problem? The first solution is to build homegrown alternatives. On rare earths, we are seeing that. New Delhi is preparing a project to boost rare earths output. Some 5,000 crores are being allocated for it. The priority is to find other vulnerable sectors and invest in them. That's the first solution. The second is to diversify. We can try to source and sell goods elsewhere, like in the US or Europe. With the US, India is trying to strike a trade deal. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar will be in the US this week. He will also attend a Quad meeting of ministers. And chances are, China will be discussed. This silent blockade is a reality check for India's China policy. Yes, diplomacy must be given priority. Yes, a reset is important. But don't forget who you are dealing with. Asim Munir is back to doing what he does best. Not marshalling his troops, not organizing his country's defense, but speaking from a podium. That's what Pakistani army chiefs are famous for. Not strategy, but speeches. And Asim Munir gave a new one on Saturday. He addressed a passing out parade at the Naval Academy. As always, it had two ingredients: fake bluster on Kashmir and raging anti-India hate. First, listen to what he said.
We stand firm with the Kashmiri people for their right of self-determination. What India tends to term as terrorism is in fact the legitimate struggle. The onus of ensuing escalation, one that may ultimately bear catastrophic consequences for the entire region, will squarely lie with the aggressor.
At home, this is like a victory lap for Munir. Despite being routed, Pakistan claims they won against India. Afterwards, Munir also visited the US. He had a private lunch with Donald Trump at the White House. So in Munir's mind, this is a victory speech. And the content is vaguely familiar. Because back in April, Munir gave a similar speech in Islamabad. He called Kashmir Pakistan's jugular vein. He also promised all support to terror groups in Kashmir. And days later, the Pahalgam attack happened. We all know what happened next. India launched Operation Sindoor in May. Our military struck Pakistani terror camps and military installations. But despite that, bloody nose Munir's rhetoric hasn't stopped. He is defending the terrorists. In fact, Asim Munir says they are not terrorists at all. He claims it's a legitimate struggle for self-determination. Needless to say, this is not true. Kashmir is an integral part of India. It is not some global cause for Pakistan to champion. But if Munir insists on championing something, we have a suggestion. A real case for self-determination, not in Kashmir, in Balochistan. This is the biggest province in Pakistan. It makes up 44% of the country's land area. Also, it's rich in resources. Balochistan has oil, gas and precious metals like gold. Yet its people live in poverty. Why? Because of Islamabad's policy making. Balochistan is a key part of China's investments in Pakistan. Multiple CPEC projects are in this province. CPEC, as you know, is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. But these investments are not helping the locals. It is only helping the generals in China. Ethnic Balochs have protested against this injustice, but the army has responded with violence. And as we speak, one such protest is underway in the province. Dozens of Balochs have organized a sit-in protest, and today marks the 5th day of the demonstration. But you won't see Asim Munir talk about that. Just think about the absurdity. Pakistan cannot even handle its largest province. Insurgents are mounting weekly attacks, yet Munir talks about India. Forget helping so-called fighters in Kashmir. Pakistan's army chief can barely hold his country together. The fact is, people can see through all this. They have seen the destruction caused to Pakistan's terror camps. They have seen the hits on Pakistani air bases. No lunch with Trump will solve that, and neither will the rants to rookie soldiers. Now let's talk about China and its military. Another wave of sackings have hit the PLA. More high-ranking officials have been pushed out. And the latest official to fall is Vice Admiral Li Hanjun. He served in the Chinese Navy as the Chief of Staff. But why was Admiral Li removed? China has not given a clear answer. In fact, the statement announcing Admiral Li's exit is brief and ambiguous. I have a quote. Listen to this. The Navy Servicemen's Congress decided to dismiss Li Hanjun from his position as a representative of the 14th National People's Congress. This is typical of China's approach. Even the language is deliberately vague. It follows an old pattern. There is no mention of what went wrong, no details about his conduct, no charges have been disclosed. In fact, whenever China removes officials this way, it usually signals the officer was corrupt. And Admiral Li isn't the only one to be purged. Liu Shipeng, a deputy chief engineer, has also been sacked. Liu worked for China's State Nuclear Cooperation, and he was expelled along with Admiral Li. Their removals are part of a wider campaign, a systematic purge within China's military and defense establishment. It is all happening under Chinese President Xi Jinping's watch. Last week, Beijing confirmed another high-profile exit. Miao Hua was dismissed. Miao was a top-level military official. He was an admiral in the Chinese Navy. His last assignment was at the CMC. Now CMC stands for Central Military Commission. It is China's top decision-making body in military matters. CMC is also one of the most powerful institutions in China. It is headed by Xi Jinping himself, and Miao served on the CMC as a director. He was in charge of political work across the military. His role included personnel promotions and ideological enforcement within the ranks. In other words, he kept the military aligned with party thinking. So Miao's ouster is a significant step, but it hardly comes as a surprise. The action against Miao follows a familiar pattern. His predecessor was also purged. So were the two previous defense ministers of China. And they gave the same reason for all the exits: violations of discipline. It's a phrase that China uses often with these exits. It usually means corruption. But these exits are significant for another reason. Xi is making an example of his own appointees. All these officials who were removed recently, they were handpicked by the Chinese president. And by removing them, Xi Jinping is sending a message. He wants to show no one is above the party, and the Chinese president himself. Xi wants a PLA that is loyal, efficient, and combat ready. He has been investing heavily in military upgrades. But that's just one part of the equation. Command and control is another. This is where Xi Jinping sees a problem, because corruption runs deep in the PLA, and Xi Jinping is unable to trust the top brass. That's why he is removing so many officials and restructuring the Chinese military. The aim is to prepare the PLA for a new era of conflict, one shaped by AI cyber warfare and drone systems. So in this strategy, loyalty is non-negotiable. And for Xi Jinping, a corruption-free PLA is a battle-ready PLA. Any instability caused by these purges is worth the risk for Xi Jinping. But this strategy can have negative consequences too, because the growing purges signal instability within the PLA's ranks and serious misjudgment at the top. This can hurt the Chinese military in the long run. It could hollow out the Chinese military. It even signals to outside world that China's military command is in flux and far from battle ready. Xi Jinping wants the PLA to be war ready by 2027. But with these ongoing purges, that target looks increasingly out of reach. For months, Benjamin Netanyahu has had one war goal: a complete victory over Hamas. But now suddenly the Israeli Prime Minister is talking about hostages. For the first time, he is publicly prioritizing the return of the hostages still in Gaza. This comes as the Israeli public has grown weary of an endless war. They want an immediate return of hostages. So what does this mean? Is Netanyahu finally responding to growing domestic pressure? Is this a prelude to a ceasefire, or is this a way to buy time from a frustrated nation? Our next report tells you.
For nearly 20 months, the war in Gaza has been a drumbeat of devastation. Airstrikes, evacuations, ceasefire talks that begin and collapse like sandcastles. And through it all, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stood firm on one message: a total victory over Hamas. But this weekend, the Israeli Prime Minister has suddenly changed his tune. He is talking about bringing back hostages again.
I want to inform you that many opportunities have now opened up, as you surely know, following this victory. First and foremost, to rescue the hostages.
More than 50 of them still trapped in Gaza since Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack. For months, they were mentioned only as tragic footnotes in a broader Israeli war doctrine. Now, suddenly, Netanyahu wants to shift the narrative. He says that many opportunities have opened up following Israel's war with Iran. And now rescuing the hostages might just come first. Or at least that saying so might be politically necessary. So what has changed? The brief 12-day Israel-Iran war gave Netanyahu a breather. Polls briefly ticked up. The public was in support of Netanyahu's military actions. But it didn't last. By last weekend, headlines had shifted back to Gaza. Over 56,000 Palestinians have been killed and neighborhoods flattened. Yet the hostages haven't still returned home. What's more, the domestic tide was turning. In Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa, thousands were back on the streets demanding a ceasefire deal. Demanding that Netanyahu bring their families home. Then came Trump, always eager to play both matchmaker and kingmaker. The US president is demanding a Gaza deal on Truth Social. After all, Trump has just handed Netanyahu a gift with the Iran strikes. Also, there is his vocal support for dismissing Netanyahu's corruption trial as a witch hunt. So the Israeli PM has no option but to listen. Behind closed doors, high-level meetings have begun again. Netanyahu has been meeting with key ministers to reassess Israel's Gaza strategy. Ron Dermer, his trusted advisor, flew to Washington to hash out the new proposal. It talks about a 60-day ceasefire, the release of 10 living hostages and 18 bodies, and a framework for ending the war. But a release of hostages demands diplomacy and compromise, even if that means negotiating with Hamas. And this reflects the divide at the heart of Israeli society. One side wants closure, the other wants victory. Netanyahu is now being asked to choose. Right now, his base is split over this decision. His rivals, like former PM Naftali Bennett, are sharpening their knives. Some are calling openly for Netanyahu to resign. And the longer the war drags on, the more the domestic chorus in Israel grows. Over half of Israelis now say Netanyahu should step down. Nearly two-thirds say the war in Gaza should end. So Benjamin Netanyahu stands at a crossroads. The Iran strikes gave him a temporary high, but the reality of Gaza has returned like a shadow. Right now, he has a chance to bring the hostages home and cement his legacy. But legacy, like rescue, depends on what you're willing to risk and whom you're willing to lose.
मैडम जी
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Welcome back. Now we are getting a breaking input from the international front. Now Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says trade talks with US have resumed after Canada rescinded its plan to tax US technology firms. Now this comes after US President Donald Trump suspended trade talks with the neighbouring nation over its plan to continue with its tax on US tech firms, which he called a direct and blatant attack on our country. All right, so this is the latest as far as the US and Canada trade talks are concerned. Remember, US, in fact, last time has said that there are not going to be any negotiation with Canada because of the tax that they have put on US technology firms. And now the latest that we are getting to know is that the talks between Canada and US is going to resume. And this has been confirmed by the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who says that the trade talks with US have resumed after Canada rescinded its plan to tax US technology firms. Now, this is happening after US President Donald Trump has in fact suspended the trade talks with the neighboring nation over its plan to continue with its tax on US tech firm, which he has called it a direct and blatant attack on the country. I'm now joined by CNN News 18's Akansha Swaroop on this broadcast. Akansha, the talks between US and Canada, which was in fact completely withdrawn by both the sides, is now going to continue again. What is really the conditions on which the talks is going to continue now?
So what we can tell you is that they are going to resume because on Friday, Donald Trump had called off the trade talks. He had said that it was a blatant attack. And remember, this is a digital services tax that you are looking at, which was imposed on all of these US tech firms. And they were supposed to be paying 3% of their business, which was above $20 million per year. And the Canadian Prime Minister and US President now will be resuming trade negotiations because finally Canada has scrapped its digital services tax, which was also to take effect after Sunday. And as we all know, this is in a bid to advance the trade negotiations, which have been stalled after Donald Trump threatened to end.
Is your computer good enough for an AI world? Well, Sam Altman says no. In a recent podcast, the OpenAI CEO said that the current computers were designed for a world without AI. Basically, as AI evolves, the computers we use will become outdated. Now, this is quite a sudden statement from Altman. This is a man who has insisted for years that only softwares need update. Basically meaning your algorithms, models, data, only they need to change. But now he is suggesting a change of the entire foundation. He wants to rebuild the computer. But is this an ideological U-turn or is a calculated sales pitch for the company? Let's look at it. To understand Altman's pivot, here's something you must know. Generative AI always needs more. I am talking about more compute power, more memory, more bandwidth. That means the current hardware is always reeling under pressure. But that kind of processing doesn't need faster chips. It even demands a new kind of system. So Altman is now claiming that the days of our devices as primary AI interfaces is over. Instead, something new is coming. And apparently, it is coming from his own company, OpenAI. Back in 2023, OpenAI quietly acquired a startup helmed by Johnny Ive. This is a man who was behind the design of Apple's iPhone. At that time, many wondered why OpenAI had teamed with a hardware designer. And the answer is this. Reports suggest they are working a mystery AI hardware project. Maybe the next computer to handle AI. The design is still work in progress, but of course, the timing is crucial here. OpenAI is facing enormous pressure from inside and out. Internally, the company is grappling with compute shortages. It is so severe that they have even delayed product rollouts. They don't have enough computing power or custom chips. And externally, the competition is sharpening its knives. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg has launched a talent raid. He has lured away 4 senior OpenAI researchers. And he is offering 9-figure bonuses. So OpenAI's leadership scrambled to reassure its staff. They describe the feeling as if someone broke into our home. The top leadership is now issuing emotional Slack messages, even promising better compensation packages. Meanwhile, the pressure is growing. OpenAI employees are reportedly working 80 hours a week. The company had to enforce a mandatory week off to just prevent burnout. And then there's the looming financial reality. Running ChatGPT reportedly costs $700,000 per day. Altman has acknowledged the company is bleeding money. They do not have millions in investments, but the financial pressure is slowly building. And finally, there is AI fatigue. OpenAI's latest products haven't dazzled. The Sora text-to-video model stumbled on release, leading some to question whether OpenAI is still innovating. So Sam Altman knows the tide is turning. The AI glitz is wearing off. So now he is making a pivot to new AI machines. Now we don't know what it will look like. OpenAI can go the Apple way, making this device a part of a bigger ecosystem like iPhone and iOS. Some reports in fact suggest it won't be a wearable. Sam Altman has however hinted that it is meant to fit in your pocket. But whatever the new device looks like, Altman's gamble comes with enormous risk. Rebuilding the computer is not just expensive, it's existential. But if he pulls it off, he will be the guy who gave us the next computer. And if history is any lesson, from Microsoft's Windows to Apple's iPhone, the one who owns the platform owns the future. India has scored a win in Sri Lanka. We have seen creeping Chinese influence in the island, especially on its maritime assets. But New Delhi is fighting back. It is bailing out the Colombo dockyard. Now this dockyard is Sri Lanka's leading shipbuilding and repair site. But recently it's been saddled with debt. How much? Around $93 million. A Japanese company owned the majority stake in this dockyard. They had 51% of the ownership. So first the officials reached out to the Japanese government for a bailout. No luck. Then they reached out to Sri Lanka's government. Again, no luck. And that's when Colombo sought out New Delhi. India saw an opportunity in this deal. Reports say multiple companies expressed interest. But eventually, the deal went to MDL. That's Mazagaon Dock Shipbuilders Limited. It is a state-run company that makes ships in Mumbai. MDL is buying controlling stake in the Colombo dockyard. For how much? Almost $53 million. The money isn't that consequential for MDL. The company is worth around $15 billion. It has an annual turnover of more than $1 billion. So the money isn't significant. What's significant is the strategic importance. Until now, MDL was a trusted shipbuilder for India, for the domestic market. But this marks MDL's first foreign venture. It could be the stepping stone towards something bigger, perhaps cutting into the global market. And it shows in the Dalal Street. MDL shares were up by 2.3% in trading today. But we'll keep the finances out of it. Instead, let's look at the strategy behind this deal. First, location. Colombo is a key maritime hub, and the dockyard is Sri Lanka's prized asset. It doesn't just serve ships in the country, it has clients across Asia and Africa. By bailing it out, India has hit two birds with one stone. First, gaining the Sri Lankan government's goodwill. If the dockyard defaulted, it would have caused a serious spillover. 16% of the dockyard is owned by the Employees' Provident Fund. 9% is owned by Sri Lanka's Insurance Fund. And 5% by the Ports Authority. Imagine if such an asset had defaulted. Even ordinary Sri Lankans would have been affected. So India was right to help out. I'm sure Colombo will appreciate the move. Secondly, it is also a challenge to China. Beijing has significant stake in Sri Lanka's maritime assets. It is building a port and city in Colombo. It has a 99-year lease on the Hambantota port. Many experts see Sri Lanka as part of China's plan to box India in. Which is why this deal is crucial. MDL says it has gained a strategic foothold in the region. So in all, it's a good deal for both sides. And for India, it's a welcome sign. Previous Sri Lankan governments relied heavily on Chinese debt. That's what landed them in a debt trap. But this time, Colombo reached out to India. And that will give New Delhi confidence. It aligns with what we have seen from Sri Lanka's President Anura Kumara Dissanayake, or AKD. He has promised to keep India's interests in mind. He has also vowed to never allow anti-India activities on Lankan soil. In that context, this deal is crucial. It shows that India is keen to engage with Colombo to help out wherever possible. Now let's shift our attention to the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Russia has just carried out its biggest airstrike on Ukraine since the war began. Over 500 aerial weapons were fired during the weekend. Ukraine says the attack targeted regions far from the front line. And it shows Moscow's intent to escalate, not negotiate. This comes after the Russian president suggested peace talks in Istanbul. Vladimir Putin now admits no progress has been made. Where does that leave Ukraine now? And what happens to Donald Trump's mediation? So far, the US president's interventions have failed to stop the fighting on the ground. Here's a report.
It is the biggest airstrike that Ukraine has suffered since the war began. Russia fired more than 500 aerial weapons in one night. The barrage included 477 drones, decoys, and 60 missiles. Ukrainian defenses intercepted most of them, but the scale of the assault was unprecedented. The attack targeted regions far from the front line. This includes western Ukraine. Moscow claimed it struck military-industrial sites and oil refineries. Ukraine confirmed the loss of a Western-supplied F-16 jet. The Ukrainian Air Force said the pilot shot down 7 air targets. His jet was damaged during the final strike. He could not eject. He was killed in action. In just 1 week, Russia has used more than 1,270 drones, over 1,100 glide bombs, and 114 missiles on Ukraine. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky issued a strong statement after the Russian strikes. He said, Moscow wants to escalate the war and not end it. On the other side, Moscow is sending mixed signals. Just days ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin called for new peace talks. Putin said, Moscow was ready to return to negotiations.
We are ready to hold such a meeting in Istanbul. As for when exactly, the heads of the negotiating teams on both sides, and they, by the way, are regularly in touch, call each other all the time, and in my opinion this is not bad already, are now discussing the time for another meeting. Well, what will be the subject? The subject, in my opinion, should be the discussion of memoranda of both sides.
But over the weekend, his position changed. Putin was sounding less optimistic. He admitted the talks remain stalled, and the positions of both sides are absolutely contradictory. Putin gave no indication of compromise, nor any details on a new ceasefire plan, and no clarity on territorial claims. This puts U.S. President Donald Trump in a bind. Soon after taking office, he prioritized ending the war in Ukraine and pushed Ukraine to begin talks with Russia for a ceasefire. Until last week, Trump was hopeful for a breakthrough.
You know, we talk about Russia, and we're working that one. President Putin called up and he said, I'd love to help you with Iran. I said, do me a favor. I'll handle Iran. Help me with Russia. We got to get that one settled. And I think something's going to happen there. But we did some great work.
So far, there are no signs of a truce in the war. The conflict is escalating, and peace continues to elude Ukraine.
South Africa's experiment with coalition politics is already showing serious strain. And this week, it nearly snapped. The African National Congress, or ANC, and the Democratic Alliance, or DA, joined hands in 2024. But this week, they clashed over the firing of a minister. The ANC fired a deputy DA minister over an unauthorized trip. The DA hit back by walking out of President Ramaphosa's key national dialogue initiatives. So is the government of national unity falling apart or just holding on by a thread? And what does this mean for South Africa? Our next report tells you.
South Africa's coalition government was already a delicate balancing act. But now, the African National Congress and the Democratic Alliance coalition has swerved dangerously close to collapse. The DA dramatically walked out of President Cyril Ramaphosa's flagship National Dialogue Initiative. The initiative set out to tackle South Africa's most pressing challenges, from soaring unemployment to rampant crime. Their reason? The president sacked a DA Deputy Minister Andrew Whitfield over an unauthorized trip to the U.S. That firing set off a firestorm. The second largest party in the country accused Ramaphosa of double standards. It issued an ultimatum to remove allegedly corrupt ANC ministers within 48 hours. It looked like the beginning of the end. And yet, just as things looked set to combust, the DA pulled back. They're staying in the government, at least for now. So, the coalition government is still intact, but it's like duct taping a cracked dam. The DA may not be leaving the coalition, but they are boycotting the national dialogue and threatening to block budget approvals. Basically, The coalition is hanging together by tension and not much else. The unity, part of the government of national unity, is looking increasingly aspirational. So what is the root of this clash? Well, it's partly ideological, partly personal, and mostly political. The ANC and DA were always strange bedfellows. The ANC, historically the Liberation Party of Nelson Mandela, embraces redistributive policies like land reform. The DA, seen by many as a business-friendly liberal party, supports free market economics and individual rights. They joined hands out of necessity because no party won a majority in 2024, but ideological differences have repeatedly boiled over. This latest spat over the firing of DA deputy minister is only the tip of the iceberg. The real clash is about trust, and there's very little of it. So, did Ramaphosa overplay his hand by firing the DA minister? That depends on whom you ask. The presidency insists the deputy DA minister violated protocol with his unapproved foreign trip. The DA is countering that with claims of Ramaphosa ignoring prior written requests and accuses him of applying the rules selectively. The deeper question is, was this about the trip or about power? Some analysts believe Ramaphosa was drawing a red line, testing how far the DA could be pushed. Others say it was a political miscalculation that nearly blew up the coalition. Ramaphosa even canceled a UN trip over fears the DA might walk away. But what does this mean for ordinary South Africans? The 2024 elections sparked some hope. Many believed a coalition could fix what a dominant party system had failed to. But there's only so much patience. The economy remains sluggish. Unemployment is stubbornly high. Electricity supply has improved, but most other problems haven't. So what happens next? South Africa is navigating uncharted territory. For 3 decades, the ANC ruled alone, and coalitions, by nature, are messy. They require compromise, trust, and restraint, 3 things in short supply right now. And if the DA walks, the entire experiment in coalition governance could unravel. South Africa might then be looking at either a weak minority government or fresh elections.
Now let's shift our attention to Europe. The continent is enduring a relentless heat wave. Extreme heat has driven temperatures to record highs. For instance, Serbia has registered its highest ever temperature. And in Spain, temperatures have reached 46 degrees Celsius. This is a new June record for the country. From France to Portugal to Greece, there are heat alerts in several nations, and countries fear the threats of wildfires. So how are governments coping, and what's behind this sweltering heat? Our next report tells you.
In Italy's Rome, tourists are drinking from public fountains to stay cool. In Spain's Sevilla, workers are pushing carts with piles of ice bags. In the UK's London, people are fanning themselves and their loved ones. Such sights have become all too common. As a dangerous heat wave grips large swathes of Europe, locals and tourists are desperately trying to keep cool.
It's awful. It makes me collapse. We need to be looking for shade constantly. Air conditioning in the car, those who have it. And look, we have these bracelets that ring with all these heat warnings.
It's hot. We have to stay refreshed to avoid passing out. So we're drinking water to stay cool and to be able to withstand the summer heat because it's quite intense, above all in the city. So you have to stay hydrated.
It is only June, but across several European countries, temperatures are far above seasonal norms. In Spain, temperatures reached 46 degrees Celsius on Saturday. This is a new national record for June. The highest temperature previously recorded for the month was 45.2 degrees Celsius, which was logged in 1965. But Spain is not sweltering alone. Over the weekend, severe heat waves have been recorded in France, Portugal, Italy, and Greece. Across the Western Balkans, temperatures have crossed 40 degrees Celsius. Serbia registered its highest ever temperature since records began in the 19th century. Slovenia recorded its hottest ever June temperature on Saturday. Across these nations, there has been an uptick in heat stroke cases, and people are scrambling to cool down. So how are governments coping? Countries are on a high heat alert. Red heat warnings are in force in parts of Portugal, Italy, and Croatia. Amber warnings have been sounded in Spain, France, Austria, Belgium, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Hungary, Serbia, Slovenia, Switzerland, and the UK. Portugal is on high alert for wildfires. So is Greece. Especially after a large wildfire broke out in Athens on Thursday. In Italy, outdoor work activities will soon be banned in many parts. Hospitals have opened up dedicated heat stroke pathways, with treatments like cold water immersion. Meanwhile, so-called climate shelters, with air conditioning and drinking water, have been set up across several countries. And authorities have issued health warnings. But the question is, why is this happening? 2 words: climate change. Human-caused climate change is supercharging disasters, not just in Europe, but globally. And as the planet has warmed, heat waves have grown stronger. They have become more frequent. And they are arriving much earlier than expected.
Look, it always gets super hot in Madrid. What surprises me is how early it's happening. We're still in June. July and August are usually horrible, but the fact that it's already like this now is surprising.
Hot weather kills about 500,000 people each year the world over. This death toll is greater than that from wars or terrorism. And if the world continues to heat up, deaths could more than quadruple by mid-century. After all, heat waves are silent killers. If climate action doesn't catch up, the health of our planet will continue to die a quiet death. But the impact will be loud and clear everywhere.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Welcome back. Now we are getting a breaking input from the international front. Now Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says trade talks with US have resumed after Canada rescinded its plan to tax US technology firms. Now this comes after US President Donald Trump suspended trade talks with the neighbouring nation over its plan to continue with its tax on US tech firms, which he called a direct and blatant attack on our country. All right, so this is the latest as far as the US and Canada trade talks are concerned. Remember, US, in fact, last time has said that there are not going to be any negotiation with Canada because of the tax that they have put on US technology firms. And now the latest that we are getting to know is that the talks between Canada and US is going to resume. And this has been confirmed by the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who says that the trade talks with US have resumed after Canada rescinded its plan to tax US technology firms. Now, this is happening after US President Donald Trump has in fact suspended the trade talks with the neighbouring nation over its plan to continue with its tax on US tech firm, which he has called it a direct and blatant attack on the country. I'm now joined by CNN News 18's Akansha Swaroop on this broadcast. Akansha, the talks between US and Canada, which was in fact completely withdrawn by both the sides, is now going to continue again. What is really the conditions on which the talks is going to continue now?
So what we can tell you is that they are going to resume because on Friday, Donald Trump had called off the trade talks. He had said that it was a blatant attack. And remember, this is a digital services tax that you are looking at, which was imposed on all of these US tech firms. And they were supposed to be paying 3% of their business, which was above $20 million per year. And the Canadian Prime Minister and US President now will be resuming trade negotiations because finally Canada has scrapped its digital services tax, which was also to take effect after Sunday. And as we all know, this is in a bid to advance the trade negotiations, which have been stalled after Donald Trump threatened to end these trade talks on Friday. And they are looking to finalize a deal by 21st of July, according to Canada's finance ministry. And it's important to also highlight that the Trumpian tariffs have taken a toll.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Wildfire spread across western Turkey as authorities struggle to control the blaze. Demonstrators stage a mock wedding in Venice to protest against the Bezos celebrations. And a Moscow cafe rides the Labubu popularity by turning pop art into Pop-Tart. Finally, taking you back in history, on this day in 1936, Margaret Mitchell published her novel Gone with the Wind. It is a sweeping romance set during the US Civil War. But it largely ignored the brutal realities of slavery. It has since become one of the best-selling novels of all time. Leaving you on that note, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
Что-то переключила?
Hello and welcome. You're watching CNN News 18's Late Night Edition with me, Arun Dhanta. Let's start this bulletin with a breaking news at the top. All right, at least 4 people, including a 72-year-old woman, were shot dead on today afternoon after unidentified gunmen opened fire on a vehicle in Manipur. Now, sources indicate that the killing are not related to ethnic tensions in Myanmar bordering states, but are suspected to stem from an inter-group clash among Kuki insurgents. So this is the breaking piece of information that we are getting at this point in time. We will be, of course, going to our correspondent there, but this is a news of a clash in which 4 people, including a 72-year-old woman, have shot dead today. There is no information about this unidentified gunman who fired on them. Let me quickly go across to Kamalika. Kamalika, when exactly this happened, where this happened, and what information do we have about this unidentified gunman?
See, what we are coming to know that it is the KNA, the Kuki National Army, and the other group that actually had a exchange of fire, and there this death, the 4th death that is coming up, and one death was the lady which was caught in crossfire on the last day, she died, and other 3 they died today because of this crossfire. And suddenly this happened in the afternoon, and one of the leaders were there in this of the KNA, which is a matter of concern. And today, what we are coming to know, the police has started, the special forces, the security special forces, they all are now conducting various raids in these places, so that there is no more violence, but the situation remains to be very, very tense there.
And Kamalika, we had witnessed in the past clashes between Meiteis and Kukis in the state. What is the situation nowadays there in the state? How things are panning and shaping?
It's the same. There has not been much change. There is no good sign of good relations development between the Kuki and the Meitei. Today, what happened that it was a fresh violence which took place. A top leader of this Kuki national organization, which is known as the KNO or the KNO, they were reportedly killed along with 2 other cadres during an ambush by a suspected militant group. So it was fight between both the Kuki groups, militant groups, in Churachandpur district today. And this was in a crossfire. A woman who was a passerby was also killed. So the top leader who has been killed, that is something which is concerning. Raids are going on also the night. That's what we are also. It will go also the night. That's what we are coming to know, so that people who are behind this, they can be nabbed.
All right, so this is the source-based information that is coming at this point, that this was an intergroup clash among Kuki insurgents. We'll be keeping a very close eye on this story. Thank you so much, Kamalika, for bringing this story. Now, we are getting some more breaking news. Let's cut across to that. Former Indian cricket captain Mahendra Singh Dhoni has filed for a trademark of quote-unquote Captain Cool, a nickname synonymous with his calm leadership style. Remember, over the years, Captain Cool has evolved into more than just a moniker. It has come to show Dhoni's ability to remain composed under pressure, from leading India to victory in the inaugural T20 World Cup in 2007 to winning the ODI World Cup in 2011 and as well as Champions Trophy in 2017. The trademarking of a name or words for branding purposes is common among global icons. Football icon Cristiano Ronaldo has used the CR7 term to create a brand around himself and has used it for his thriving business empire. So perhaps Mahendra Singh Dhoni, former Indian captain, is also eyeing on a brand that he wants to create with this nickname, Captain Cool, which he used to call during his period when he was playing. And he had shown at multiple instances that the way he sailed India, the way he guided India through his cool and calm composure, and that's the reason why he was called Captain Cool. So now he is, of course, eyeing on that. We had seen even in the past multiple athletes, people who are very famous, they've been using this tactic. For example, you have Cristiano Ronaldo. He, of course, had 7 number on his jersey, and he has made a brand out of it, which is doing exceptionally well. All right, now we're getting some more breaking news. Let's move to that. Shocking incident involving the death of 5 tigers at Male Mahadeshwara Hills Wildlife Sanctuary. Senior forest officials have been sent on compulsory leave. Disciplinary action will likely to be taken after the inquiry report. Notably, 3 accused from Kopa village were already arrested and have been remanded to extended custody till July 3. All right, my colleague Harish is with us on the phone line. Harish, some senior officials have been sent on leave even when you don't have the inquiry completed. What is prima facie the authorities have found which actually led to send these people on leave?
Well, there seems to be a dereliction of duty in terms of not being able to ensure that cattle doesn't enter this reserve forest area. Remember, it's a wildlife sanctuary. The fact that not just cattle, but the herdsmen also managed to enter this area, and this seems to be a practice. Remember, all the three arrested are herdsmen who had poisoned the cattle carcass there, which led to the death of a tigress and 4 of her cubs. So that's the reason, after complaints about dereliction of duty, not discharging their duty properly, the Deputy Conservator of Forest, the Assistant Conservator of Forest of MM Hills, both of them have been sent on a compulsory leave. The government making it very clear that disciplinary action will follow once the inquiry report is submitted and once the inquiry report pinpoints the kind of faults on part of these officials.
And Harish, on which angles this investigation will take place? I mean, which are the areas in which these people will be looking into to actually go to the conclusion of this?
In terms of the investigation, there will be 2 major aspects. One, they've already arrested 3 people. The person to whom this cow belonged to, the person who mixed poison in the carcass, and the other person who had helped. Now the investigation will focus towards where they procured it from, how they entered this wildlife sanctuary. Was it a daily affair? How many people were doing this? All this will be probed by the team. The investigation or this inquiry will also look at the kind of dereliction of duty from these officials. How did they allow these herdsmen to enter wildlife reserve? How did they allow cows to be brought into this wildlife reserve? All these aspects will be probed, and also other allegations that the forest watchers there, who are daily wage laborers, are not being paid regularly. Did that lead to, in any way, the entire patrolling exercise getting compromised? These are aspects that the entire inquiry will now focus on.
All right, so every aspect in this story will be investigated to actually reach to the cause of this exact issue. Thank you so much, Harish, for the update. Now moving on to some more breaking news. Ezra over Malayalam film Janki versus State of Kerala grows. Kerala Education Minister V. Shivankutty didn't hold back, taking a sarcastic swipe. He wrote on Facebook, and I quote, "My name is Shivankutty. What if the censor board comes this way?" A pointed jab at what many are calling an overreach. It comes, of course, amid a fresh controversy in Kerala's film and political circles. The release of the Malayalam film Janki versus State of Kerala, starring Union Minister and superstar Suresh Gopi, has hit a roadblock. The censor board has asked the filmmakers to drop the name Janki, claiming it refers to the Hindu goddess Sita. All right, my colleague Neetu is with us to give us more perspective on this story. So Neetu, how do we see this? Do we have any political angle behind this where they want this to be removed from the film's name?
See, in this particular instance, we didn't see any protest or anything. It was purely the decision of the censor board, where the Central Board for Film Certification told the makers that the movie will only be certified if you remove the name Janki from the title, and also the protagonist is Janaki in this movie, so her name also needs to be changed. So that is what. That's how this entire issue came, and then the makers also approached the High Court. Today, the film fraternity was sitting in a protest outside the regional office of the censor board, stating that this is an overreach and its arbitrary decisions are being made. In the High Court also, asked some pointed questions towards to the board, asking, you cannot intervene with freedom of expression, and this is like the board telling the directors what to do. So that those questions were also asked. The case will again be considered on Wednesday. It's in the midst of all this that we saw a pointed jibe from Kerala Education Minister V. Shivankutty. Shivan, as we know, is again another a Hindu god's name, and so he went on to say that my name is Shivankutty. What if the censor board comes this way? So definitely this issue has not gone well with the political circles as well as the film fraternity on how the board dictates what name can be given to a character or even the title of the movie.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Neetu, for putting this story into perspective. Now, shifting our focus to Karnataka. Amid talks of a change in leadership in Karnataka, Congress chief Mallikarjun Kharge did not categorically deny the rumours, but instead passed the buck to the party's high command. When asked about the renewed buzz over a possible leadership change in Karnataka, Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge had just had one answer. He said, and I quote, "It is in the hands of party high command," unquote. BJP seized the moment to ask the most obvious question: who exactly is this unseen, unheard high command? Taking a swipe at Kharge, BJP questioned, if not the Congress president, who is this high command? Who is always felt? Kharge's remark comes as Congress General Secretary Randeep Singh Surjewala's Bengaluru visit has fueled talks of DK Shivkumar replacing Siddaramaiah as the Chief Minister. Meanwhile, Chief Minister Siddaramaiah dismissed rumours of discord between him and his deputy DK Shivkumar, saying the government will remain intact for 5 years like a rock.
That is in the hands of High Command. Nobody can say here what is going in the High Command. This is left to the High Command. High Command has got power to take further actions, but unnecessarily one should not create problem.
आखिरकार सच जुबान पर आ ही गया। जो वर्स्ट केप्ट सीक्रेट है कि कांग्रेस में अध्यक्ष की कोई वैल्यू नहीं है, प्रथम परिवार की ही वैल्यू है, वो खड़गे जी ने खुद बयान कर दिया। उन्होंने कहा कि कर्नाटका का सीएम कौन होगा, क्या चेंज होगा, ये हाई कमांड तय करेगा। मतलब वो खुद हाई कमांड नहीं है। मतलब कि कांग्रेस में कोई चुनाव नहीं हुआ। मतलब कि एक दलित नेता अध्यक्ष बनता भी है तो उसको कैसे अंडरमाइन किया जाता है, रिमोट कंट्रोल किया जाता है, जैसे मनमोहन सिंह जी को किया जाता था। और असली पावर सेंटर तो परिवार ही है। ये पारिवारिक पार्टी, फैमिली रन इंस्टीट्यूशन है, फैमिली फर्स्ट है, पार्टी फर्स्ट नहीं है। एक दलित कांग्रेस प्रेसिडेंट की कोई भी इज्जत और सम्मान नहीं है, तो ये पार्टी रिमोट कंट्रोल्ड बाय फर्स्ट फैमिली है। इसका प्रमाण आज सामने आ चुका है।
All right, my colleague Harish is with us on the phone line. Harish, we've been hearing this. BJP has been saying that Congress is a family-run party, family-ruled party. Do you think this statement of Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge has given more fodder to the BJP?
Well, absolutely. The fact that Mallikarjun Kharge is saying that the High Command will decide makes many wonder if Mallikarjun Kharge has forgotten that he's the High Command. He's the man who's heading the Congress party in the country. It gives ammunition to the BJP to further say that it's a remote control party post now. But more importantly, one aspect that needs to be highlighted here is that Mallikarjun Kharge is not ruling out a leadership change. One would have expected the Congress to categorically mention that there is no leadership change if there was no deal between DK Shivkumar, Siddaramaiah and the Congress High Command to change the leadership after 2.5 years. He hasn't ruled it out. And perhaps that's the reason DK Shivkumar's camp will be in a way emboldened that their demand is legitimate, and in a way it's been indirectly ratified with the statement of Mallikarjun Kharge.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Harish. We have some reactions on this story. Let's listen to those.
ಅವರು ಉಸ್ತುವಾರಿ ಜನರಲ್ ಸೆಕ್ರೆಟರಿ ಬರ್ತಾರೆ, ಅವರು ಅಭಿಪ್ರಾಯ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಏನು ತೊಂದರೆ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಏನಾಗಿದೆ ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ, ಸಂಘಟನೆ ಏನೇನು ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ಅಂತ ಕೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ಅದು ಬಿಟ್ಟರೆ ಅವರು ಉಸ್ತುವಾರಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಅದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಅವ್ರು ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ.
See, Surjewala ji is our in-charge General Secretary of the AICC. He keeps visiting Karnataka to look into various aspects, not necessarily governmental issues. Politically, in terms of party, strengthening the party programs, and obviously if there are any disturbances within the party or in the government, naturally, as an in-charge General Secretary, he will guide us.
Any news that is circulated in the media about some leadership change, etc., are only a figment of your imagination. This is an organizational exercise we are undertaking.
All right, we're getting some more breaking news. Union Minister and BJP President JP Nadda held a meeting with all the BJP MPs who are part of India's global outreach after Operation Sindoor. In the meeting, we're given to understand the BJP MPs shared their experience about how the interaction was and what responses they got from the other nations. Remember, this meeting was with the BJP chief JP Nadda, and we've seen the global outreach that India undertook after the Operation Sindoor to, of course, send out a larger message to international community that why India conducted Operation Sindoor against Pakistan. My colleague Payal Mehta is with us on the phone line. Payal, now since all these MPs who are part of the diplomatic mission of India have met BJP chief JP Nadda. Now, can we say that the briefings and the update which they have given to JP Nadda will be reflecting in the further strategy which JP Nadda and party will be forming for the coming days and months?
To begin with, Arun, this was an informal gathering which was there at Nadda. And obviously, Mr. Nadda listened to each one of these MPs to understand what their experiences have been and what they've been able to, give as a message from India to the world about India's fight against terrorism. Obviously, a lot of exchanges took place in terms of the ideas because, several MPs have brought back the feedback that many countries to engage with larger relations, whether it's trade or, soft power as well, and that needs to be pursued. Also, we wanted to also convey to the party president that there should be more such engagements that take place, both formally and informally, and intra-party delegations should be having more of this sort really happening. Mr. Nadda has told them that he will convey their message to the powers that really matter as well. But not to forget, the Prime Minister also met all these delegation MPs and MPs from the opposition, and similar sentiments were also expressed by them as well. So both in the case of Prime Minister Narendra Modi and now in the case of BJP National President, he has conveyed his congratulations to the members of Parliament, essentially saying that they turned out to be great ambassadors for India's message to the world and India stands united.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Payal. We have a reaction on this story. Let's cut to that.
जो भारतीय जनता पार्टी का जो सांसद लोग इस पे गए हुए थे, उसी का साथ अध्यक्ष जी ने मिला. सबका अपना अपना एक्सपीरियंस जो हुआ, कैसा इंटरेक्शन रहा, रिस्पॉन्स कैसा रहा, चाहे यूरोपियन यूनियन हो, चाहे मिडल ईस्ट हो, चाहे यूएस हो, वो सारा का वर्णन हुआ. और सबका यही कहना है, ऐसा डिप्लोमेटिक एक्सरसाइज तो चलता ही रहता है, लेकिन पॉलिटिकल एक्सरसाइज भी होना चाहिए. और डायस्पोरा का साथ एक आपस में उसका संबंध ठीक से रहे. काफ़ी उत्साह दिखाई दिया सारे डायस्पोरा का, इंडियन डायस्पोरा का इधर, जो वो लोग भी चाहते हैं जो बार बार ऐसे प्रोग्राम हो.
तो सर, आगे के लिए कुछ प्लान हुआ है कि अभी जाएंगे या अभी इसके बारे में?
आज अध्यक्ष जी ने पूरा सुना, और पार्टी का डिसीजन तो कलेक्टिव होता है. वो पार्टी से भी और प्रधानमंत्री से भी इसका ऊपर चर्चा करेंगे.
All right, we're getting some more breaking news. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, in a big remark against state-sponsored terrorism, has said that it is imperative to call out terrorism publicly when it is supported by a state against a neighbor and is fueled by the bigotry of extremism. A strong reference to Pakistan. Jaishankar, who is on a 3-day visit to US, made the remarks while inaugurating an exhibition titled The Human Cost of Terrorism at the United Nations headquarters. So this is the statement which India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar made in United Nations headquarters. We have a reaction of S. Jaishankar. Let's listen to that.
5 weeks ago, the United Nations Security Council issued a strong condemnation of a particularly horrific act of terrorism in Pahalgam. It demanded that its perpetrators be held accountable and brought to justice. We have since seen that happen. What that response underlines is the larger significance of the message of zero tolerance for terrorism. The world must come together on some basic concepts: no impunity to terrorists, no treating them as proxies, and no yielding to nuclear blackmail. Any state sponsorship must be exposed and must be countered. By now, we know well that terrorism anywhere is a threat to peace everywhere. Let that understanding guide our collective thinking and response. This exhibition is a fitting reminder of the challenge before us.
All right, my colleague Akanksha Swarup is with us on the phone line. Akanksha, it seems that India has decided that wherever they are going to get the opportunity on the international forum, international platform, they're going to expose Pakistan and their sponsor terrorism. And this is, of course, one more reflection of that, isn't it?
Arun, it's important to understand that this was not just an opportunity. This is the platform where India can bring in global awareness with regards to terrorism. And this was a UN exhibition called The Human Cost of Terrorism at the United Nations headquarters in New York. As EAM rightly highlighted, that this was the very place where a resolution was passed condemning the terror attack in Pahalgam on 22nd of April. And so External Affairs Minister, sending out that very, very clear, crystal clear, very definite, concrete message when he says that let terrorists not be treated with impunity and or their proxies. And remember, this comes 2 days just after what General Asim Munir had to say at the passing out naval parade on Saturday. He's again talked about how what India may regard as terrorism will be considered as a legitimate struggle by Pakistan, and that Pakistan is going to give them complete diplomatic and military assistance. And so for the Pakistani army chief to be getting away with such comments, he's been making time and again. Remember, United States is where he was meeting, dining with the US president. And so for the External Affairs Minister to deliver that very strong message at the UN headquarters at an exhibition which is to call out the human cost of terrorism has a larger symbolic message. Not to forget that Dr. Jaishankar is there as part of the Quad Foreign Ministerial meet at the behest of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who extended that invitation to him. And Quad is going to be hosted by India this year later. And so the United States is very much aware of India's clout and role in not just maintaining peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, and perhaps it's a wake-up call for Washington, D.C. itself, that if there's going to be instability at the border areas of India, particularly with Pakistan, how can they expect India to ensure that there's stability